Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and I am your host for this show. My hair is doing a thing today. I'm very sorry. Anyway, before we kick off with the show, let me give you a brief intro about what we're doing here today and some administrivia. For those of you who are new to the show, who are joining us here on the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk for the first time, this is a resource for you to get all the help you need during Hacktoberfest to land your pull requests with just 3 days left to go. We want to help show you new projects you can contribute to, new ways you can contribute, hear from expert maintainers about how they do open source, and get some tips and tricks that you need to make those pull requests. So today we're being joined again by a very special guest, Mr. Matt Cowley, who I will introduce to you shortly, though by the look of chat, everyone here is from the Hacktoberfest Discord, so knows Matt very well, but we'll bring Matt on in a minute. Before that, some things to note. As I said, we are here to help you, so you can ask questions in the chat at any time, and we will try and answer those questions. If your question isn't relevant to what we're talking about right now, that's still perfect. Just be patient, and we will get around to answering your question as soon as we change topic. In regards to some other things, links, URLs, you are welcome to post links to stuff you're working on in chat or to useful resources. Please do that. Just be advised there is a moderation bot running, and our moderation bot doesn't like URLs and links. All you need to do is @RaiseDevs and let me know that you're going to post a link, and I will add you to the permit list so that you do not get your link deleted and get yourself timed out. So, just to summarize, ask questions in chat, let me know if you're going to post a link, and I'll add you to the permit list. Other than that, other things to run through. This is our first of 3 shows today, and we've got 3 shows for the rest of the week, Thursday and Friday. You can see our full schedule at twitch.tv RaiseDevs schedule. Really exciting schedule, lots of really amazing guests. That schedule is complete, and you can find it now, but stick around at the end of the show, and I'll give you a teaser of what's to come. And then the final note from me is if you haven't heard of Raise.dev before, but you are looking to level up in your developer career, whether you're trying to get your first job after a career change or a boot camp, or you're trying to get a promotion or a raise, we might be for you. How we work is we match you with an expert coach, someone with real life developer experience at companies, who will work with you on projects, pair program with you to get you the experience that you need to make that jump in your career. And we are completely free whilst we're in early access. You can sign up for free now. Thanks, Karen. Welcome, Karen. Welcome, that copy. All the Hacktoberfest Discord out here in strength. Final thing to note, as I said, there is free shows a day. There's a lot of shows. Drop us a follow here on Twitch, hit the love heart, hit the bell, and you'll get notifications when we go live. You don't have to keep track of our shows. The computers will do that for you. Isn't that wonderful? All you have to do to make those computers manage your schedule is hit the love heart and hit a bell. So, that's everything from me. Let me bring on our guest of the first show of the day. Welcome, Matt, to the stream. How are you doing?
Hello. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. I'm full of first stream energy, and it's great to have you back on the show.
I'm full of half a cup of tea energy currently.
Half a cup of tea. We need to.
I haven't got through a full cup yet.
Astute viewers may notice that I'm wearing a hoodie from the open source project we had on last night. I've just realised I should probably take this off.
No, I like it. It's good.
Welcome back to the show. So I mentioned welcome back to the show. For those folks who missed the previous show, would you like to reintroduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, I'm Matt Cowley. I go by Matt IPv4 on socials generally. If you've never met me, I work at DigitalOcean as the community platform manager. So I look after the community website there and things like Hacktoberfest. Beyond that, though, and what this stream is about today, I also work for Cloudflare as a maintainer of cdnjs, which is an open source CDN service. And we're going to have somewhat of a chat about that in probably quite a rambly fashion.
Yeah, so I guess first thing to mention, as I said, Matt has been on the show before, and we spoke all about, I guess, like the many jobs you do and how you manage your time, but also Hacktoberfest. So if you want to catch that show and you want to hear about the Hacktoberfest app, you can jump into our Twitch channel, go to the videos, and you will find that show. It'll still be online. It'll still be online for, I think, about a week, and then we'll move it over to our YouTube. But Friday, we're also going to be talking about Hacktoberfest again with both you and a previous maintainer of the Hacktoberfest app, Chris Ewald.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, so we're talking more about that at the end of the show.
So cool. Today, cdnjs.
Yes, indeed, yes, Matt's second job. So what I want to start with, I think, is the concept of CDN, because I think many people, especially many developers, will have encountered this in that, like, they've probably thrown a URL into a script tag that has CDN in it, or they may have even used like a CDN service. But for folks who, are not yet deploying web apps at enormous scale, what is a CDN and why is that a thing that exists?
So, a CDN, content distribution network.
Right.
Basically, the core concept behind it is have your web assets closer to your end user instead of
Right.
just on your single origin server where your website
Right.
is hosted.
Right.
Yeah, that's basically the core concept of it.
Cool.
There are a lot out there. For example, cdnjs, one of the biggest that I work on, is run by Cloudflare now. There's also JS Deliver, which you may have heard of. They have a slightly different architecture for everything they do. They're backed by multiple CDN providers.
Interesting.
Google have their own CDN as well. jQuery, I think, technically have their own. There's also Max CDN, which does like a lot of the Bootstrap stuff.
Right.
So there's quite a lot out there, really.
Yeah, a lot of CDNs. So I want to briefly dwell on one thing you said. So, like, getting your content closer to the end user rather than like your single origin thing. So, I guess to put that materially for like folks who are like starting to get involved in the cloud, like, say you go to AWS and you deploy a server on like AWS West. Like, your server is in the West and the West Coast of the USA, and like folks in India or Europe, like that's a long trip. So the idea of a CDN is like content, like big content that will take a while to download, is like available everywhere. And like on servers close to that. Perfect. Cool.
Yeah. So in the case of cdnjs and Cloudflare,
Right.
the assets that cdnjs hosts are mirrored to every single one of Cloudflare's data centers around the world.
Cool. Right.
So if you're in India and you request a resource from us, you'll get a response from a server in India, as opposed to going to the west coast of the US or whatever.
Yeah.
So it makes everything much faster.
For sure. So I guess we should talk a little bit about what Cloudflare actually is.
Oh, I should also point out actually on the speed thing as well whilst we're here.
Yeah.
Though this is technically no longer relevant because browsers change things. It used to be the browsers would have a single cache per domain.
Okay.
So if a user had gone to one website that used a cdnjs resource and then went to another, the browser already had it cached. So that was another reason to use CDNs back in the day.
Right.
So you'd actually be reducing the number of requests. Right. However, browsers change things, and so cache resources are now sandboxed by the domain you're actually on.
From. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is no longer very relevant.
Cool. But I guess, interestingly, that's like, I don't know, a good argument for CDN centrification, which I don't think is a thing to have a good argument for. But anyway.
I mean, there's probably still some caching happening at like, I don't know. I don't know network infrastructure well enough, but next level up from your browser, there might still be caching going on there as well.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, sure. So yeah, briefly, just folks who haven't encountered Cloudflare before, I think most people who like casually browse the internet will have only encountered Cloudflare when they hit one of those like, "Are you trying to DDoS us?" like timeouts. What is a Cloudflare?
What is like a Cloudflare?
Cloudflare, yeah.
Cloudflare are a big company that do a lot of really cool things. At their core, they're a CDN as well. They also do DNS, which is how you use their CDN by proxying your requests through them. But they do all sorts of other really cool things now that I'm not really. I wouldn't say I'm really qualified to talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. That's
but they basically run the internet.
That is, that was like how I was going to put it. But yeah, there's a lot of. They have a really fascinating blog where like. For example, like when you get those like huge outages where like it seems every website that's hosted in California like goes out, they like do really good blogs about like. I remember they did a blog a couple of years ago about there was like some enormous outage that like knocked out like a seventh of the internet or something, and they did a really good examination into like what actually happened.
Generally those are BGP issues that knock out a lot of the internet. But yeah, Cloudflare. A lot of the internet goes through Cloudflare. And equally, they now have recursive DNS services as well. So. Even if a website doesn't go through them, you might be using their DNS service and then going through them anyway.
Yeah. My other favorite Cloudflare fact is their wall of lava lamps.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The wall of lava lamps, which is in their... I can't remember what office it's in. Is it San Francisco? It could be San Francisco.
Yeah. So
that powers the internet security, really.
Yeah. So actually, I guess we should briefly talk about that. So they generating random numbers. Not actually a solved problem, it turns out. Making random numbers is very hard. And so, like, there's lots of different ways of doing this, like, based on timestamps, based on, like, noise, based on whatever. Cloudflare have a wall of lava lamps in their office in San Francisco, and they use that as the seed for a random number generator based on the movement of the wax in the lava lamps.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
It's really cool. And I think
yeah.
possibly the most random number generation that exists at present.
So this is purely UK nonsense. Do you have any premium bonds?
No.
Okay, so in the UK, a big way of like saving money is premium bonds, which are basically like backed by the government. This is now completely out into the realm of nonsense, but this is a very like traditional way of saving money in the UK, and it's done by like a government-backed bank called NSNI. They have the way the premium bonds work is like you don't get interest, you get a prize at the end of a month, and you have a different chance of getting a different prize. So like based on your premium bonds, each bond that you own is one ticket for the lottery basically.
Yep.
So like you could get if you've got like £1,000 of premium bonds, you've got 1,000 tickets, and so you have a chance of winning an amount between £20 per ticket and up to like £1 million per ticket. They have a random number generator to pick who wins, obviously, called Ernie, and Ernie is like the history of Ernie is fascinating itself.
I was like, really hoping what you're about to say was an old bloke sitting in his home. Just randomly picking
unfortunately not. But Ernie stands for the Electronic Random Number Indicator Equipment. And bearing in mind, as I said, like this is a really old way of like people saving in the UK. Ernie was first like made in 1956, and so like the history of Ernie is basically the history of like random number generation in computing. It's really cool the different technologies they go through and like have been through for Ernie. And they're like on the Wikipedia page, you've got like they've got like a little kind of history. Now, what do they do now? Now they're using a quantum random number generator to generate these numbers.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool.
I still like think lava lamps are more random.
Lava lamps is pretty cool. Who's just posted a bunch of links and got themselves banned? Was that that was
Spambots.
our daily visit from the Spambots.
I like Luke, the links embed themselves as a Vue CLI app.
Yeah. Luke, you can post links. There you go. Oh yeah, so this is so they all got deleted. Yeah, so Luke is telling people you can't share links. Don't worry, Luke. Close.
There's the lava lamps.
Perfect. Great.
I think there's probably an entire blog post on the lava lamps. I imagine.
There definitely is an entire blog post on them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big enough tangent. So you work on cdnjs and you maintain cdnjs. Where do you want to start? Do you want to
let me share a screen and we can just start going through things. So there we go. I'm gonna pull that up.
Yep, there you go.
There we go. So this is cdnjs on GitHub. I guess one of the most important? I don't know. One of the key factors in cdnjs is that everything is open source that we do.
Right.
So which means we can make the claim that we're the #1 open source CDN. Because
Nice.
Google's above us, but they're not open source. So yeah, absolutely everything we do is open source on GitHub, including every single asset on the CDN. So
interesting.
We have an incredibly large repository, cdnjs/cdnjs.
So it's like the homebrew method where like every package in homebrew is in the repository kind of situation.
Yeah.
Does that?
So
this must have broken GitHub at one point.
Oh
surely.
yes, absolutely. I have an ongoing ticket with them that I actually chased yesterday.
Right.
So yeah, this is I think 80 gigabytes of Git data, and if you clone it, it's like 400 gig.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah, it's the most insane repository in the world.
Right.
But yeah, every single file that is available on cdnjs is in this repository. If you wanted to host a mirror, clone this repository, stick Nginx in front of it, and you're done. That's what we do.
Right. Awesome. Very cool. So this immediately raises. I'm currently writing down a bunch of questions because I already have some. Like, how? And I guess this now makes sense what you were saying to me before the show about getting into the Git stuff. How do you even work with a repository that's 400 gigabytes when cloned?
So, long story short, we don't anymore.
Right.
It became unmaintainable.
Interesting.
Up until about a year ago, we did work with it.
Right.
Generally, external contributors would work through GitHub itself.
Okay.
Because GitHub doesn't need to clone the entire thing to add a new file. Their web UI is actually slightly optimized.
Yeah.
So external people would generally add things that way. for myself and Peter, who was the other maintainer at the time, you had to essentially know your way around Git quite well. It involved a lot of sparse checkout and shallow clones and such
Right.
to actually work with it in any meaningful way. We don't use it anymore in that context. This repository is now completely robot only.
That's so fun. Oh, I see the robot only badge. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
And there's an entire introduction down here about it being robot only. We've actually got GitHub Action workflows as well that close all pull requests automatically.
Right. Can't you just turn pull requests off?
No, you can turn issues off, but not pull requests,
Interesting. Okay.
which is really silly because a pull request is an issue.
Have I made a mistake by allowing people from the Hacktober's Discord to post map merch in here?
Absolutely not. It was quite funny.
Oh,
I got to click this now. What is it? Let's see. I like it. I mean, I'm not sure I do. I'm not quite sure I'm sold on the font choice, but you know.
Perfect. You are an ecosystem unto yourself.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah,
cool.
we don't use this repository. Well, we use this repository, but humans don't touch it anymore.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. Long story short, we all got bored of trying to deal with it. And so we wrote some new Go logic that just pushes things here when we need to.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, even GitHub Actions, because like the default like thing, I can't remember what it's called. The default like functionality that GitHub Actions like all starts with, like, you know, that like the little action for cloning stuff. Like most GitHub Actions start with cloning the repo into their runner.
Yeah.
I
tried to clone this into an Actions runner.
Yeah.
It wouldn't go well. So yeah, there is a Go bot sitting on a server in Cloudflare that has a full clone of this running locally.
Right. Cool.
Which now handles everything that needs to interact with this repository.
Cool. Which that in itself, is like an interesting thing that, like, I guess at some point in this it'd be interesting to talk about, you know, corporate sponsorship of important open source projects.
Absolutely.
And like the fact that you need a server that, you know, just straight up, you know, has 400 gigabytes of storage at least, is already, you know, would be a big cost for a normal open source project.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. So as you said, I've got an open ticket with GitHub actually.
Yeah, right.
One of the things we had looked at doing was automating this through their API instead of having a clone.
Yeah.
So instead of using Git at all, just do it all through GitHub directly.
Yeah.
Turns out the API doesn't like this repository. And you just get blank internal server errors back from the API when you try to do anything with this repository.
That's so funny. Sorry, go on.
I've had a ticket open with GitHub now for about a year and a half,
Right.
and there's zero progress. They do like to they do reply to me and tell me that there's still an internal engineering ticket for it, but just
that's good.
No one wants to solve it.
Yeah. This is the last tangent I'll go on before I let you go back to explaining how it works. I just noticed in the contributors, the third picture in the dude with the helmet on, Peter Dave Hello is an awesome member. Like, he used to be a GitHub Campus expert. And he's just an awesome guy and such an amazing contributor of several open source projects. I'm super excited to see that he's involved. That's really cool.
Yeah. So Peter worked on. Actually, I can open up contribute. Let's see if this is going to load. We might be here a while.
The latest data.
Wow. Okay. Someone's created these recently.
And then there's Peterbot. Yeah, that used to be my favorite fact about Peter. That you go to Peter's GitHub profile and you're like, wow, this guy contributes a lot, and then you realize that actually half of his contributions are in a bot.
So Peterbot was what automated cdnjs prior to us doing the re-architecture we can talk about in a minute. Prior to it becoming robot only. Right. So Peterbot was the old auto-update bot.
Suddenly, the whole history that you told us in the last episode is making sense. I'm guessing the breaking point was when Peter had his mandatory military service, and then suddenly you lost a maintainer.
No, I don't think it was military service. Peter just kind of gave up, didn't want to work on it anymore. I don't really want to go into the politics behind how that all happened. But yeah, long story short, Peter left cdnjs, and so Peterbot disappeared.
Yeah. It's funny that it still has the most commits.
Yeah, and so Robo
cdnjs
is the new replacement, which is slowly catching up.
Right.
But yes, I say Peter's maintained this for a really, really long time. So credit to him for keeping it going.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, Peter works on Docker Node now.
Oh, cool.
And all sorts of other awesome things.
Cool.
Definitely
Yeah.
hasn't left the open source place. Just
Yeah.
cdnjs.
Awesome. Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah. So the re-architecture that happened. Actually, there's two stages to the re-architecture. The first one was kind of the Git administration side of things. So obviously we abandoned this repository in a human sense,
Yeah.
though it still has everything in it and is updated. All the human work moved into the packages repository, which is a much smaller repository with just all the JSON files that describe all the packages we have.
I see. Okay.
So this is the key difference between cdnjs and something like JS deliver or unpackage. Both of those just mirror npm and GitHub. So if you request a library that they've never seen before, it will be slow because they go to npm or to GitHub and request it,
Right.
but then they cache it on their server. So that's how they build up their origin.
Okay.
But for us, we have a defined set of packages. So there's never any slow requests because everything that's there is there or it's not there. But therefore, we don't directly ever talk to npm or GitHub during a request. So a key part of how everything works is our auto-update logic. So every single package in this repository, the, I don't know, 4,000 that are in here, have either a configuration that says, get my files and new versions from npm, or one that says, get my files and new versions from Git.
I see. Okay.
And that's how we update all the packages.
Right.
So robo cdnjs, which we just saw a minute ago,
Yeah.
every 2 hours, roughly. Obviously, it gets longer and longer as CDN grows.
Right.
Iterates through every single package that we have and checks for new versions for each one, either on npm or Git, and then pushes up new versions to that repository.
Okay. Awesome.
So that's the first bit of the re-architecture that
Yeah.
happened, which makes obviously human maintenance far easier because suddenly you can clone this if you want to.
Right. So this just so in the other repo is actually like the full packages for each of those. Not
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
So if we go in here, we can pull up an example. Let's go to something that's reasonably useful. Let's go to like Twitter Bootstrap. But yeah, so this is Twitter Bootstrap, and obviously we've got every version. You can see how far back these go, like 9 years.
Yeah.
But if you look at like more of the recent ones, like 15 days ago, we've got 453.
Right.
And yeah, and all the assets are in here.
Cool.
And so you can actually, like, if we go to one of these, you can take this bit of the URL,
Yeah, and just
go
use
to
that.
cdnjs.cloudflare.com, and it's there.
Nice. Super cool. Awesome.
So this is where we then go into the second bit of the re-architecture.
Yeah.
So that was the first bit where we just changed how we're administering things in Git. But at that point, this repository was still the CDN origin. So quite literally, there were 2 origin servers in a Cloudflare data center somewhere that had full clones of this with Nginx in front of them.
Right.
And then we relied on Cloudflare's actual CDN service to cache it at all the data centers.
Okay.
So technically, up until we re-architected really recently, you could have a slightly slow request. If you hit something that had never been cached before, you'd go back to a Cloudflare origin to get it.
Okay.
But obviously, that's not the most maintainable thing in the world either. It doesn't scale that well, and also isn't very robust.
Right.
So these 2 origin servers were in a single data center, and during one of the outages, one of the outages you mentioned, actually, I don't think it was one of the BGP ones. I don't know. Did you see the blog post a while ago where they unplugged an Ethernet cable in a data center and broke everything?
No, but that's hilarious, and I will definitely have to go find that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel really sorry for the technician that did this, but
Right.
a Ethernet cable was unplugged in one of Cloudflare's data centers, and there was not redundancy in place, and it took out the data center.
That's absolutely
And
hilarious.
as part of that,
And
it
also,
took out our 2 origin servers.
Right. And so it took out every website that uses Bootstrap.
Yeah. We should actually, at this point, took out every website. Indeed, it took out 11% of the internet.
That's amazing. That's so funny.
Which is, awkward. I mean, I say that, it didn't. because it only took out the origins. All the
Right. And
cache,
a lot
all
of
the
that stuff would
cache
have been
versions
cache.
were
Yeah.
still in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it did cause some social noise, obviously, because assets
Right.
were being requested that weren't cached.
Right.
And that kind of prompted us to then look at, what's our next step to make this more robust.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided, well, actually, the magic of now being run by Cloudflare,
Right.
we had an intern for the summer,
Ooh, very
a
fancy. Open
paid
source project.
intern. It
Yeah.
was amazing.
That's awesome.
Um,
Cool. I have a question about that as well.
yeah, it's like, yeah, part of being a massive open source project, which is curses all open source projects really.
Right.
There's never enough dedicated contributors generally.
Right.
And so having a paid intern made this very much more possible. And long story short, we moved cdnjs to Cloudflare's KV Workers product.
Okay.
So we probably talk a bit about what KV Workers is.
That'd be great. One, I want someone in chat. Thanks. Let me know my sound is kind of low. AL7. I think that was probably just because I was speaking quietly. I will put back on my normal shouty self. Let me know if that's better. Sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
Yeah. So KV Workers is actually a combination of two products essentially.
Right.
First of all, we have the Workers product,
Mm-hmm.
which allows you to run code at the edge.
Okay, so I hear this phrase all the time. What does that mean?
At the edge, not in the Edge browser, as some people have taken it for.
Right.
At the edge is, I don't know. I was talking to my dad about this a while ago, actually.
Yeah.
And he's in IT as well, and he's very cynical
Right.
about such things. And he was just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're just running an Origin server on someone else's server."
Right. Okay.
Which I mean, essentially is what KV Workers is,
Okay.
with a load of magic in place.
Right.
So you can run fast stuff in the data centers around the world. So instead of a request going back to an Origin server,
Right.
you have some scripting logic that's sitting in the data center that responds immediately. So kind of like how caching works, but
Okay.
actual compute, but very limited compute.
Okay.
You get like 8 nanoseconds of compute time.
Interesting. Okay.
I could be completely wrong on that number. It just sounds right.
Yeah, it's in the sounds like it's in the ballpark.
Yeah.
Okay.
But essentially, like you can have a React, like even a React. Well, yeah, you can run React in it, but you can have any kind of a router written in like JavaScript that just runs in a data center on every request. And with Cloudflare's magic, there's also no cold starts, so it's instantaneous basically. And so that's what workers are. And then KV is kind of an add-on to it. Cloudflare marketing are going to get really angry at me for this description.
That's right. You're paid to be a maintainer, not to be the marketing. It's all fine.
Yeah.
If anyone in Cloudflare wants to jump in chat and add some
Yeah.
notes, you're very welcome.
I don't know if anyone's here. So KV is then kind of the add-on to that, which is a key value store.
Right.
It's that basic, but it's again like your worker. It's replicated around the globe to every data center. So KV and workers combined gives you KV workers, which allows you to basically have compute running on the edge with a data store.
Cool. Okay.
I should then also point out that like 2 weeks ago, Cloudflare also launched durable objects, which is like
Such a great name for a product.
which is like another extension to having data store on the edge. Allows you to like store full-on objects. I haven't played with it yet, but it looks cool, but we're not using it. So yeah, so Cloudflare, so cdnjs now uses KV workers for its infrastructure.
Right. Cool.
So I guess
a couple of questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Is Matt going to show the code that cdnjs actually runs on?
So we can get into that. The short answer is there is no code. Like cdnjs itself is like could be hosted as a static site essentially. But we will talk through a lot of how it works as we go through.
Perfect. And
what was the
then
other
the other one, what if I tried to fork cdnjs?
It'll it'll work.
Yeah. It's down to how clever GitHub is with
It will
what
just
they
take
do
a
with
while,
forking. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
a really long while, but you can do
And
it.
someone in GitHub DevOps will scream, "There's like 4.4 thousand forks of it, so you
Yeah,
can do it."
I
But
mean,
yeah.
I imagine a lot of those are quite old forks,
Right.
but you can do it. Um,
Yeah.
luckily, like, yes, it's 400 gigs,
Right.
but it's 400 gigs from like a couple 100,000 files.
Right.
So like, there's no individual file that's big.
Right. It's not a project that needs, for example, like Git large file storage, right? You're
Yeah,
not hosting big
it's
big
got no
binaries.
large binaries or anything. It's
Yeah.
all just like, I mean,
Lots of files.
it's
Yeah.
essentially mostly JavaScript and CSS files,
Gosh,
downloaded font files.
400 gigs of JavaScript. What a
Yeah,
nightmare.
which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Cool. Yes. So I completely interrupted you. So
Go for it.
continue from
Yeah.
where I picked up.
So, it now runs on KV workers,
Cool.
and the way that kind of works now is I mentioned this auto update bot that pushes to this repository. As well as doing that, it now pushes up to workers every time there's a new file.
Sure.
But actually, we optimize it slightly differently. So in this repository here, there's all the raw plain files that cdnjs has. But in KV workers, we actually only store gzipped and brotli compressed versions, just because KV has a limit.
Sure.
Yes, it's designed to host files, but not big files, and cdnjs has some oddly big files. I know I just said it doesn't have many big files,
Yeah.
but the limit is, I think, like 10 meg per value.
Okay.
And so like some large font files and stuff generally fail that. Oh, and JavaScript map files. You would not expect them to be the largest thing, but they are just ridiculously large.
Interesting. Okay.
So we store brotli and gzip compressed versions where we can. We still actually have the origin servers running a clone of this.
Right.
Because if a file is larger than 10 meg, it doesn't make its way to workers.
Sure. Okay.
So a request then gets passed through back to this origin.
So I think you may have just answered indirectly the question Hugh asked, which is, I may have not caught this because making tea, but do the workers run in the origin or the cache or both?
So the workers run on Edge. So I don't have an infrastructure diagram for this.
Yeah, I'm looking in the KV workers docs now, trying to find something of that nature.
So let me. So we'll start with an end user. End user makes request to cdnjs.cloudflare.com.
Right.
Anycast DNS happens. You get back an IP address for the nearest data center to you. Your request goes to that data center. The first thing it will go through is general cache. So on top of all our workers and origin logic, we still use Cloudflare's actual CDN caching product. So if a request can be cached, it will be cached, and that's the first thing that can respond. If that fails, if there's a miss, it then stays within that data center still and gets a potential response from a worker. So that then does that KV workers lookup. And if there's a brotli or gzip compressed version, and the request can accept a brotli or gzip compressed response, we'll send that from the worker. If that fails and there's a miss there, the request then goes back through all the way to the original origins. I don't know where they are anymore, actually. We might have them more now. But yeah, so there's cache, then workers, both at edge, and then origins.
Okay. Cool. I hope that answers that part of Hugh's question. And then the next,
I guess I can answer the performance monitoring bit as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if that I don't know if something we would get to at the back end of this, or if you want to deal with it now, but wherever works.
Long story short, I don't. Yeah, I really don't ever look at like performance monitoring for it. The only monitoring that I really have is Twitter.
Right. Are people
you know,
screaming?
Yeah, with 11% of the internet relying on it, Twitter is actually a really good alarm for when things are going wrong.
Yeah.
Like I think last week on Friday, we did some late night maintenance, and we published a bad DNS record for like 30 seconds.
Right.
And in that 30 seconds, we got like 2 user reports
Right.
on Twitter. So yeah, Twitter is a wonderful alarm for monitoring what's happening. But yeah,
It
we
works for
don't
natural
really.
disasters. It will work for a CDN.
Yeah, and when things actually break, Twitter is an interesting game to deal with.
Right.
Yeah, I don't monitor performance. I don't speak for the rest of the team though, because obviously I should. I guess we can talk about how it works in terms of I'm a maintainer, but also
Yeah.
paid by Cloudflare.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great.
So I guess we can do a bit of a story into how this happened.
Yeah, which we covered in the last show.
We did.
But yeah, for folks who weren't there, it makes sense
Yeah.
to cover it.
So up until about a year and a half ago, cdnjs was maintained by myself and Peter, completely in our spare time, unpaid.
Right.
As with most open source projects,
Right.
which is, I don't know, really sad, especially when you think about the fact that in the case of cdnjs,
Right.
11% of the internet relies on it. You'd think there'd be some funding in place, either from companies that care about it or companies that use it. But there isn't really. We do have an open collective. It got like $50 a year of donations.
Right.
So nothing that was ever going to sustain paid maintenance. And long story short, Peter and I did not have the access we needed to maintain cdnjs in an effective manner.
Sure.
Our founders had kind of dropped off the radar and left us in a bit of a sticky situation. Peter got, at the end of the day, Peter got a bit fed up with that and quit.
Yeah. Which is very, like, maintainer burnout is a very real thing, which is totally reasonable.
Yeah, I'll say he's been maintaining this since like mid 2014, I think. So, time had come. And so at that point, I was left on my own, essentially trying to maintain 11% of the internet, which doesn't work, especially when you don't have access. So at the time, I didn't even have administrator access to this repository, and there's branch protections in place, so I couldn't even merge a pull request. Physically, I could not do that. I would have to use an alt account to make a pull request, and then from my account that has maintainer access, I could approve it and merge it.
Amazing.
Which is just ridiculous. And so I reached out to Cloudflare. I was just like, this isn't working. I think we actually had a GitHub issue that started this conversation.
Right.
And it made some Hacker News threads.
Oh, wow.
And caused quite a bit of noise. I think John, Cloudflare's CTO, ended up replying in that Hacker News thread.
Right.
And that kind of started the whole conversation about how Cloudflare are going to help. And after a lot of kind of back and forth and conversation, Cloudflare kind of took over running it. And as part of that, I became a paid maintainer that worked for Cloudflare. So I'm very external still. I'm paid by Cloudflare, but I am an open source maintainer and nothing more.
Right.
There is a team within Cloudflare that help look after it. I think they're part of the speed and performance team. Though I could be entirely wrong on that. Sven is the primary person that helps work with me. So he works with Cloudflare, does a lot of other stuff, but also helps look after cdnjs.
Yeah.
And then we had Tyler, who was our intern for the summer.
Right.
Who was employed by Cloudflare as well. So
cool. I just
kind
posted a link to both the issue and the Hacker News.
Yeah.
It seems like Luke knows the Hacker News item ID off by heart and has it tattooed on his body, maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, there's some interesting reads if you do want to read through it. It was a rough time for cdnjs for a little while. But we're in a much better place now.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know.
We've done it again. We've gone on the tangent.
Yeah, I've
halfway through explaining how it works.
What we've covered and what we haven't at this point.
So the place we went on the tangent was you describing the re-architecture through KV workers. It wasn't on the origin servers, and then you mentioned durable storage, and that's when we went off the rails. So
right. Yes. So, wow. Jumping back to KV workers and how this works. The second bit of the re-architecture was updating updating the auto update bot to
Right.
not only push this repository but also storing KV workers. And then there's that whole workers logic that now sits at the edge for all cdnjs responses that tries to send that workers response first. So yeah, there is all the Go logic. So the auto update bot was written by Tyler, our intern, over the summer. He did an absolutely wonderful job, you know. Honestly, we gave him quite an impossible task of writing the new auto update bot from scratch.
Yeah, so when you say there's no code that like runs cdnjs, I guess like the code that there is this automating bot.
Yeah, so there is a tiny worker written in JavaScript that isn't open source. So that's why I said asterisk at the start. That's like the only thing that's not open source. I am internally still pestering to get that made open source, but I think it's like blocked on a legal review or something stupid like that.
That makes sense.
So that's like the only thing that's not open source. Everything else is open source. But yeah, that's the only code that like directly runs the CDN itself. But then yes, obviously the auto update bot is basically what keeps cdnjs alive. And so that's written in Go and exists in here under like, I think the tools repository actually has all the logic in it now. Yeah, so it's all written in Go. All the logic is here if anyone does want to read through it. I don't know Go. I didn't write this. So I'm not really going to dive into how it works. Yeah, but at a high level, it has a clone of this packages repository, which has all the JSON files in it that dictate how packages update. And it has a clone of that cdnjs/cdnjs repository. And it iterates through every single package in this repository, checks for updates, and then pushes them up to the Git repository and up to workers.
Cool.
Fundamentally is what it does. It does some other stuff. It updates like our Algolia index as well, and things like that. But yeah, that's already in Go. Again, open source if anyone wants to take a look at it. There's also like 16 issues open. So I don't know. If someone wants to
optimize how we deal with Git sounds like a good one.
Yeah. So even with a bot now having being the one that is responsible for working with that Git repository, it's still slow. Who'd have thought? Like even adding a file to Git takes a while, the 400 gig repository, because it's got to write all that objects data into Git.
Jesus.
So yeah, there is some thinking was done, kind of maybe we actually get the bot to automate how we used to do sparse checkout. So it's working with a limited repository and stuff like that. There's all sorts of stuff here. So if someone does want to have a look at any of these, you're more than welcome to. If you want to do it in the next 3 days, let me know, and I can add some Hacktoberfest topics to this. But you know, it's here all year round.
Nice.
So yeah, that's all the Go code.
Only got 3 days left for Hacktoberfest. You need to find yourself some permanent projects, people.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the Go code that runs the CDN itself, or well, the auto update side of the CDN, which is like the core of how cdnjs works. So it used to be back before the days of this automation and restructure. Peterbot had similar logic. So Peterbot, back in the days of just the cdnjs repository, would also try auto updating stuff. But there was also quite often a case where a maintainer or an external contributor would have to manually be adding files per version. Which is painful. It's a security nightmare. Because, you know, if an external contributor comes along and goes, I want to add this version of a package.
You have no idea if they've changed anything.
I'd say we've got to basically go through and diff every single file in that against the source to validate that it's correct. It's also a pain because with the auto update bot also running in that repository, if it pushes a commit to master whilst you're working on a pull request, the automated check that GitHub does to see if you can merge something takes about 10 minutes. In which time the bot's pushed a new commit, and so it takes 10 minutes again. So actually trying to even merge stuff into that repository is an absolute nightmare.
Um,
So yeah, the fact that we re-architectured is just a lifesaver, really.
so a question that only just occurred to me:
Go for
how
it.
does the package get into cdnjs?
Right. So again, back in the olden days,
Yeah.
it would have been added directly to the cdnjs/cdnjs repository.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been basically the same structure as it is now.
Right.
You add that JSON file that dictates what a package is. You
Mm-hmm.
could have had an auto update config, though back then auto update configs weren't mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you'd end up having to commit versions manually.
Mm-hmm.
Since the re-architecture, all that JSON stuff now lives in this packages repository, and having an auto update config is mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to add a new package to cdnjs, all you do is rock up in this repository, go into the packages folder,
Mm-hmm.
go into the right. We have it all sorted alphanumerically. Go into the right folder and add a new JSON file.
Right.
And once that gets merged, within 2 hours, the bot will pick it up and will start adding versions. There is. I'm really bad at writing contributing files. A lot of my projects don't have them. This one does. So we have a full contributing file that goes through the whole process of adding a new library and how auto update works.
Nice.
Because it does confuse some people.
Yeah.
I actually, so this is where my work at DO and Cloudflare actually mixed a bit. I
Nice.
wrote an entire tool at DO for explaining how globs work
Oh, cool.
because the whole of auto update relies on globs to
Right.
decide what files we pull in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other bit. So it's like JS deliver and unpackage.
Mm-hmm.
They just copy whatever's in an npm package or a Git package.
Mm-hmm.
In cdnjs, you can change what files we copy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can basically go into any directory and say, I want these files copied.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can stay at the root of the package and say, I want these files copied. Or you could do a combination.
Right.
So like if the package had its files in a /dist directory,
Mm-hmm.
we can say, use that as the base directory and then
Right.
copy files. And so we drop that dist directory to make things simpler.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all described in here in our auto update overview.
I also just like seeing what you're showing us right now. I didn't realize this was functionality on DigitalOcean, and that is fucking cool.
Yeah, we have a whole set of open source tools. This is one of my favorites. I have even like added a button to import files from an npm package. So
Right.
again, just to make my maintenance life easier in cdnjs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like this example here, for example, kind of explains what I mean by having this base path.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a tree of an imaginary package pulled down from npm.
Yeah.
And so the files we want are within this dist directory,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't want that. That's a redundant directory for us. So we can just say, use the base path as dist, and then have a set of globs that pull up files.
Right.
And so we're going to go into that dist directory and then match those files.
Right.
So the resulting structure on cdnjs is just that those files are at the root of the version.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, it all confuses people. So
Right.
there's a long explainer here. Yeah, and we support npm or any valid Git target that has tags.
Cool.
So on Git, we use the tags as the versioning.
Right.
So yeah, that's all in
Nice.
here.
Cool.
If anyone doesn't want to add a package, it's all here. There's also, I saw Hugh asked about policies.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to ask about that. Yeah.
We don't have a policy on an owner of a package publishing a package. Anyone can add any package they want. The only policy we do have is here somewhere. Yeah, we have a popularity requirement, which is kind of possibly why we don't have quite the market share we do.
Right.
If you wanted to use a really tiny package from npm, we
Yeah.
probably don't have it and probably won't add it. So then you go to like JS deliver and unpackage,
Right.
because there's still some level of human involvement in adding packages.
Sure.
We have this requirement. So like if you're adding an npm package, we look for like roughly 800 downloads a month. You know, something to justify that this package is actually used by people
Right.
and not just
Right.
you. And on GitHub, we look for like 200 stars. But these are all like rough advisories. If someone rocks along and goes, I've got this package that's like not very popular, but actually a lot of people use it.
Yeah.
it's a human process, so
Right.
we can add that.
Discuss those cases. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I guess
Actually,
is why we don't see do username on cdnjs.
yeah. Actually, I can probably add that at some point. But yeah, I've actually got some open pull requests here, which I thought would be quite some good examples of the CI we have in place now. So as part of the Go bot we added that automates all the updating,
Okay.
it also has all the logic in place to validate a package, a new package being added. So like this is a user contribution that got submitted yesterday. Adds a new package. If we go into here, we can see all the warnings that the bot has produced. So, for example, file name is missing.
Right.
We generally expect the package to have a default file to suggest to users. So when you search on the cdnjs website, we have a file to recommend, and we highlight it as well. So obviously for a lot of packages, that's their minified JavaScript bundle or whatever. And then it's the other interesting one, going back to that KV workers point and large files. This package, for some reason, has some very large files in it. They're too big. And so the bot is, warning us that those files aren't going to get added. They will actually get added to the Git repository, but they won't go up to KV workers.
I see. Okay.
I mean, super long term, we're actually looking at what we can do to get rid of that origin completely. But until we find a proper solution to big files, it's going to be there.
Right. Right.
But yeah, so this bot will actually kind of validate everything in here. There's a full JSON schema, I think, in that tools repository that dictates exactly how this file should look. And so you can see here, this is kind of how we match files that we want to add in. So again, they're using this base path dist to drop that dist directory, and then they're just matching everything that they need.
Very cool.
So yeah, so that's how you add a file, add a library if you want to do it.
Interesting. So it's all within the repo rather than on the. So the reason I asked that question is I was poking around the site and realized it didn't say anything on the site, but it makes sense. It's in there contributing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we get quite a few contributions now. Compared to what it was a year ago with the old repository.
Right.
You basically got a lot of issues asking for libraries, but very few people actually adding them.
Sure.
And now that it's a nice repository to work with, there's a full contributing file, there's an automated CI to help you.
Yeah.
We actually get contributions.
Very detailed automated CI.
Yeah. I think it even validates like whether a license is a valid SBADX identifier and stuff like that. It's pretty full on CI, which is wonderful.
It's very cool. Oh god, I ate my second coffee of the day. Neato. So I eventually want to get round to less code topics and onto, like, you already told a story about how the sponsorship came around, but I would love to hear about what it's like managing an internal open source project. That's a very weird situation. But before we get onto that, I want to make sure that we like do all the talking about the code and the project that you wanted to. Is there anything else in terms of how the project works or the re-architecting that you wanted to cover before I go take us on a tangent?
I guess the website isn't that interesting. I rewrote it a while ago. It's now a Nuxt website.
Ooh, yeah, up to date.
It's in the static website repository, which is a bit of a lie in the name. The website isn't static. I actually had a conversation with Luke about this in the Discord a while ago. My original plan had been to build it in Nuxt and statically generate it.
Right.
Turns out Nuxt doesn't really like generating a couple 100,000 pages.
I see.
Because
so
obviously
is it server-side rendered, or?
Yeah, so cdnjs obviously has a page for every library for every version,
right?
Which is a really large number, and all that data has to be fetched from the API. So if you try to run Nuxt generate on this repo, it'll probably first, and if it doesn't it's going to take many hours.
Right. I love as an abbreviation for well, as a way of saying that particular out of memory squandary. That's very good.
Yeah, I think it will get through 64 gig if not more. Yeah, trying to do it. It's ridiculous.
Nice. Luke said largest Jamstack site in the world.
Yeah. So yes, it is running Nuxt serve.
Cool.
Sitting on, I think, a Heroku origin.
Nice.
So
I'm
yeah,
assuming that they are also sponsoring the project then.
they are also a sponsor.
Cool.
They cover the credits.
Nice.
We
Awesome.
have a. Oh, let me go to the website. We have a lot of sponsors, which I
There's a
guess is
lot
a
of
good
sponsors.
segue
Yeah.
into your point.
Okay, so status page and discourse, that
Yeah,
explains
so
those. Yeah.
Cloudflare obviously are the primary sponsor. They've been sponsor
Right.
for like since 2011, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They were back then obviously just providing the origin and the domain, but obviously now they essentially fund it and run the service.
Right.
Algolia, big sponsor. They power all the search and also a lot of some of the API.
Mm-hmm.
Um, DigitalOcean, less of a sponsor than they used to be.
Right.
Peterbot used to run on Dio,
I see.
um,
Okay.
but now Dio is mostly just using a testing context.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of very large droplets spun up that have full clones of cdnjs if I need to
Right.
experiment with stuff.
Cool.
So
Nice.
yeah, they're less of a kind of core to cdnjs sponsor, but still super important.
Nice to have utilities and tools around.
Yes. Actually, technically, I lie. We launched App Platform like a couple of weeks ago, a week ago,
Right. Yeah.
which is our new product as a service. Yeah, that sounds right.
Platform as a service, PaaS.
Pass. That's the one.
Yeah.
So there's now actually a development version of the cdnjs website and the API running on App Platform.
Nice. Cool. Nice.
They were actually running on App Platform before App Platform was public. And we had load balanced like 10% of traffic from the live website to it.
Yeah.
To literally just load test App Platform before it went public.
That's cool. That's nice.
Because the API is pretty intense.
So really what you're saying is cdnjs sponsors DigitalOcean and provides
we load
testing.
test them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what Dio does. Heroku, very similar. We use them for hosting
Right.
the
site.
the production website, the staging website, and the staging API.
Mm-hmm.
The production API is hosted internally at Cloudflare.
Sorry,
I think for legal
I just
reasons.
looked over at the Discord to just see like
I haven't looked at
five
my
map swag pictures in a row. Sorry, so for legal
brilliant.
reasons, it's hosted over there.
Yeah, I think it could just be that was the cheapest place for us to put it. I can't remember.
Right.
But yeah, the production API is in Cloudflare.
Mm-hmm.
We then got the status page because cdnjs has a status page.
Yeah.
And the status page have the most wonderful open source program.
Right.
Discourse. We have a discourse for cdnjs. cdnjs.discourse.group.
Well, you're going to that, Luke. It's bold to be in chat saying that you were looking sad on your wedding day, dude. I know what you were trying to say, but I don't think that came out how you were going for it.
Yeah, so we have a discourse which gets some use. It's just another channel where people can ask for help if they need it. So they sponsor that. SolarWinds sponsors some of our monitoring. So there's like basic uptime monitoring. If you go to CDN uptime, that's Pingdom, which just is part of SolarWinds now. I don't know when that acquisition happened, but yeah. So they sponsor that. And then Sentry also sponsor us.
Cool.
Because the website produces a lot of errors.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. The API, like the only error that goes into the API now is the fact that a response was slow.
Right, okay.
Because I added custom error handling for that.
There is some performance monitoring then.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't look at Sentry really, but it's there.
Thanks for sponsoring Sentry. We have you. We're using up your platform.
Let me open up a different window so I can just make sure I'm on the right thing.
Yeah.
I will show you the situation that we have.
Wonderful.
API.
Just a reminder, folks, if anyone has any questions, do throw them in the chat. We will answer them.
Here we go. API production. Yeah.
That's
16K.
Yeah.
If we go into here, this is basically going that the response was too long.
I see. Okay.
So whenever a response takes like longer than a second and a half, we fire an event into Sentry.
Hey,
just
Rick,
to track it.
Us. Cool. Okay.
So yeah, let's actually jump into the API code quickly because that got a re-architecture as part of the re-architecture. So previously, the API had a single JSON file that had all the metadata for every package on cdnjs. It's like a 400 megabyte JSON file, which just has every library in every version, all the metadata, not the actual files.
Right.
And that was held in memory in the API and would allow all the responses to be generated. With the move to KV workers, there isn't really a single thing anymore that has all that data in memory at any point.
Okay.
That metadata is now in KV workers, but split by package.
Right, okay.
And so we didn't really have a way to generate that JSON file anymore. And so we re-architectured the API. And so now when you make a request to the cdnjs API, if you're making like a package request, it in the background is making another request to KV workers to get the metadata it needs.
Okay.
It's probably my utils, I think.
Yeah.
Libraries, that'll be the one. So you can see here, this is the place where our metadata API is.
I see.
And essentially, like if you want to fetch, for example, a library version, you make a request to the KV API. There's a lot of caching in place in here as well to make everything faster. But it does also mean now that the API doesn't use like 4 gig of memory continually.
Right.
It's like
Which is nice.
a 500 meg running service now. So,
Cool. Nice.
I mean, in theory, you could now write this as a worker itself. It's just not architectured that way currently. It's an Express app.
Right. But it's doing its job.
It's doing its job. But yeah, so that's why we have that Sentry error, because making a request to workers, processing that, and then responding back to the original request is a bit slow. And also, we're trying to speed up everything as much as we can.
Cool.
I don't know. I don't think we should. We don't have to dive into the code in depth unless people really want to.
No, that makes sense. I think that's good. I think that was a good look into what's happening with that, and also like again, like one of the things I think is really interesting about this that I'm glad we got to talk to you about was like this is operating again at a kind of a wacky scale. So like having that what you mentioned there in terms of what and how you architected it was pretty key.
Let me see. Actually, you know what? Instead of going to the dashboard, we have another repository called CF Stats.
Okay.
This is a repository that holds a report for every single month in like the last year and a half. So at the end of every month, I create a support ticket with Cloudflare, and I basically ask them, send me some stats about cdnjs.
Right.
So I don't know, it's actually quite an interesting point, and it shows how external I am.
Right.
To get these stats because it's a Cloudflare domain,
right,
I don't have access. So
right.
to get these stats, I have to make a normal general support ticket. And then
you pedestrian.
Yeah, and then it gets processed and I get the stats back. But yeah, so we have this in here. There's actually a database. So if you wanted to look at the stats for cdnjs like the last year and a half and process it however you want, it's all in that database. But there's also monthly reports and some nice graphics.
Nice.
So this is my favorite graphic.
Is that PBs in petabytes?
Yes. So last month we served roughly 220 billion requests, which consumed 3.8 petabytes of data.
Right. Amazing.
Which is just wacky. Like,
right.
Yeah. If you start actually thinking about the scale, you start to worry.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know how I would feel if I was responsible for 11% of the internet.
Yeah.
I think I would have anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, I can jump into a report because they're actually quite interesting. Like my favorite one actually is the average request is only 17 kilobytes.
Right. So that's like a shed load. Let me find that like diagram for like what a petabyte actually is.
Petabyte, which kind of just it's 3.9 petabytes sounds like a lot. But when it's 220 billion requests, it's not.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is a good one. So, hang on, how many petabytes was it? 3.9?
3.9.
Okay, so this doesn't put it entirely in scale, but 10 petabytes, right? So the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa, 2,717 feet. If you were to stack standard commercial hard drives on top of each other,
Yep.
10 petabytes would be 2,968 feet. Just in
Damn.
hard drives, 10 petabytes would be taller than the tallest building in the world, stacked. So like you are
Yeah.
what, like a thousand feet worth of like 1,500 feet worth of hard drives.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I always try to look at kind of the top libraries as part of this as well.
Right.
And the really interesting one that happened this month, jQuery had 10 billion requests.
Jesus. Just
It's
jQuery
ridiculous.
alone, which is
It's
so funny when you consider like like the general like level of like developer discourse is like, oh, jQuery is dead, PHP is dead, and then you're like 10 billion requests. Like,
yeah.
it's crazy.
Well, I mean, like, so that's for one version.
Right.
Overall, I say overall in the top 100, and we only ever look at the top 100 files. In the top 100, jQuery had 25 billion requests, which is ridiculous. You'd think it would start to become less and less popular as
Yeah.
vanilla JavaScript can do it all, but no.
Right.
Like, I mean,
Web form, yeah.
so jQuery 3.3.1, which is what had 10 billion requests, had a 100% increase this month.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Also, it's crazy to me that it changes so much month on month.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, is
like
that
it's
new
growing.
is that new web services using this technology launching, or is that like people changing their browser habits month on month? Like, I imagine like, for example, like, you know, the seasonal holiday rush, like everyone suddenly jumping to like different e-commerce websites in Christmas must affect your
Yeah.
data because the technologies in those sites looks different. But like, how can you double the amount of jQuery usage in a month? What is happening to cause that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't
So
talk
interesting.
about the domains that use it
Yeah,
because
of
that's
course,
like
yeah.
private information.
For sure. It's
But
just really interesting.
I did
Yeah, this is
when
me
I
talking
when I
abstractly, not
yeah
asking
when
you
I
for
saw that spike, I did have kind of a similar thought. You know, what has caused that? Having looked at the domains that are using it,
Yeah,
it's just more websites using it,
that's so
or
funny.
websites that are using it getting more traffic.
Yeah,
There was nothing
yeah,
that stood out in that list as like,
yeah.
oh, it's a single site scraping it or something.
Right.
It looks all genuinely organic.
Interesting. Huh.
But yeah, I mean, like, I think there's probably some seasonality. If you look at the
Yeah.
graph here, for example, during last winter,
Mm-hmm.
things were kind of a bit lower.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, it's growing. And if you look
Yeah.
at like W3 Text, which tracks the overall
Right.
market share,
That is an up and to the right.
it's growing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's surprising. It's weird because I care so much for cdnjs and work on it,
Right.
but it does always seem weird to me that the CDN is still growing because
Yeah.
they're becoming less and less of an important technology.
Mm-hmm.
Because like
Interesting.
now as I mentioned right at the start, browsers don't have a global cache for cdnjs or anything.
Right.
The performance gain in a browser is much less.
Yeah.
And as people start to use Cloudflare or other CDN services for their own sites,
Right.
they have that benefit of being on every data center anyway.
Yeah. But people just don't like to build their own dependencies, man.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, so like I think a lot of our market, I really don't know.
Yeah.
I would guess a big part of our market is kind of developers building quick projects.
The fact that the top project is jQuery, like,
Yeah.
I would if I was seeing like jQuery and Bootstrap up there, I would totally just say like, this is people just throwing shit in script tags, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, so like the way even I now, I generally use it. If I'm working on a quick project that I don't want to deal with bundling,
Yeah.
I stick it in. But on big projects, like even the cdnjs website itself doesn't use cdnjs; it bundles everything.
Yeah. And even like, what was that? There was a big vulnerability thing with a bank that came out like last week, where like I think
Yes,
was using
Barclays. They were using
So, like,
Web Archive as a CDN.
right. So like, even on like, places where like really they should be doing better than introducing these like external vulnerability, like external
that was
like increasing
painful on a lot of levels. It was like,
exactly.
one, you're using a CDN, which is a bit risky, but two, you're
it's
using
Web
Web
Archive.
Archive, which just isn't a CDN.
Yeah, right. That poor like barely surviving project that's trying to maintain the web is like serving your content for free.
I should point out now, Cloudflare is working with Web Archive.
Nice.
So if you've seen ever Cloudflare's always online technology,
Right.
which you can enable. So if
Yeah.
your origin server goes down, Cloudflare will try to serve a cached version of your website.
Mhm.
They're now kind of extending that to use Web Archive,
Nice.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I have no insight into this beyond being a normie on the
The
internet.
fact that you pay attention to cdnjs
But
because
my,
it's
my
relevant
guess
to what
would
you
be
do.
that therefore that also comes with Cloudflare working with Web Archive on better
Right.
infrastructure.
Right.
But still, yeah, Web Archive is not a CDN.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. But yeah. So yeah.
Oh, I
So
guess
I guess like
security is a point we can talk about if you want.
yeah, for sure. Go for it. Yeah.
Um,
Running. Yeah.
so security. In terms of like the actual assets on cdnjs, obviously the Git repository is open source. Anyone can go back through the 84,000 commits to audit things.
Right.
Now that we're in KV workers, you can't audit KV workers, but we have this logs repository,
Right.
which the bot also, writes into. So every time it touches anything in KV, it logs it in here. So you can audit that as well. So that's kind of the auditability of the CDN side of things.
Right.
But obviously, web security is more than just trusting the origin. You shouldn't trust the origin. Someone could still, in theory, I know SSL kind of stops this and all that TLS.
Yeah.
But someone in theory could hijack the origin, and send you a different resource, and that's where SRI comes in. Sub resource integrity. If we go to like view, for example,
Okay.
when you request an asset
Yeah.
nowadays in a browser, you can give it a hash to compare.
Okay.
And it will, when it requests that resource, take that hash that you've given it in your source code and check that the file you got back from the origin matches that hash. That stops any reasonable attempt to forge a response. Unless someone is clever enough to change the response but then pad it to match the hash. But we use, I think now, SHA-256.
Okay.
Let's just paste this and see. Yeah, we use SHA-512.
Even bigger.
So the chances of someone correctly padding a different file to match is very unlikely. So yeah, if you're requesting resources from cdnjs, make sure you provide the SRI value with it.
Cool.
So in a script, it's integrity. You just provide it like that, and the browser, when it requests, will check that the response matches that hash.
Yeah.
I think for like CSS, Vue has no CSS. Let's go to Bootstrap. In the case of CSS, it is, I think, the same thing. Yeah, again, it's integrity.
Cool.
So yeah, that's my point on security.
Well, that's something new today. I never knew
Provide
about
hashes, because then things just can't be forged.
Right. Cool.
But also, yeah, that's why I'm so keen on cdnjs being open source, though.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't trust the browser side of things, the fact that you can come into the GitHub repositories and audit everything, yeah, it's wonderful.
Nice. That's awesome. Cool. Wonderful. Luke said, "What's the entropy on that?" So that is bringing us close to time. Is there anything you want to throw in before we wrap up this edition of the show?
I don't think so, really.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. Open source maintenance is interesting.
Yeah.
Having corporate backing makes it even more interesting.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I guess actually to bring something in from the last show, just to briefly steal this for a sec. One of the things we spoke about in the last show in terms of like having corporate backing was how so many open source projects like aren't in this position of having corporate backing when they are key infrastructure. So something I shared, which I will share again now because it's super relevant, is Nadia Egball's Roads and Bridges report, which is looking at like digital infrastructure, i.e. like the open source projects and the parts of the internet that are like really integral. So the example that she draws on a lot is curl, which is like a core part of how all
everything works.
HTTP works. And it's like maintained by like one dude who lives up a mountain, right? And like there's no funding on that or anything. So the fact that cdnjs is 11% of the internet and is sponsored and has that support is really great, but also like far and away the norm. And so it's really fantastic to see that, and it's something that we need to be seeking out more and demanding
Yeah.
more of. So, like,
And so,
people
like-
who are maintaining big chunks of the internet shouldn't go unrewarded for their efforts.
Yeah, so the example of curl being one person,
Right.
and equally, I mean, like cdnjs, up until a year ago,
like
that
two
was
people. Yeah.
2 people in their spare time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we should draw far more attention to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like in the case of cdnjs, there's quite, for example, there's quite a few Microsoft sites that use it.
Yeah.
Haven't seen a penny.
Right.
I mean, yes,
Yeah,
it's open source, so there's no obligation to do that or expectation.
right.
But when you have big companies relying on it,
Yeah.
it always amazes me there's no funding.
Gets kind of into like a wider discussion about open source, which we haven't touched on in the show, but maybe after Hacktoberfest we will. Gets into like a wider conversation about like open source and like the values as in like philosophical values, but also value as in monetary value of open source, which is like the original thing that kind of started the free software movement, was like, like individual rights, and at the moment it's much more like, cool, individuals do the labor and companies get to monetize it, which is not what the plan was. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a discussion that's happening. We will maybe
it does.
bring
It
someone
comes
on
up
to
on
talk
Twitter
about
every so often as well.
that. Yeah.
So,
You said Microsoft only do acquisitions. The NPM folks got paid. Now they're Microsoft NPM. True. Before we end up rolling out the red flags, let's wrap it up.
that final comment.
Yeah. yes, indeed. Strong endorsement for that message. Yeah, so we'll if people are interested in this, let us know in the chat or let us know in the Discord, and we'll maybe get into. There's a group of people I would love to have on the show to talk about, the open source economy, I guess. Maybe I'll ask Nadia. Maybe Nadia would join us. Anyway, so yeah, thank you so much for diving into cdnjs with us today. Last thing I want to go over, you are back with us on Friday, as we said.
Yeah.
So I guess to give more details on this, Chris is a developer and a coach here at Raise.dev, and in a past life, Raise.dev worked with DigitalOcean to make the Hacktoberfest app, which Matt's now pulling up. So yeah, there's Chris first in that list, the man on the grass with a backpack on.
There we go.
MK
Chris.
Code. So yeah, he was a maintainer of this app, worked on it a year ago?
Yep.
Cool. Worked on it a lot a year ago before last year's Hacktoberfest. And as you can see from the graph immediately below that, Matt was around and working on it a bit then as well, but has been doing a lot of work on it this year. So we're having both Matt and Chris on this Friday, the last show, the 9 p.m. UTC show for 5 p.m. East Coast time show, where we will have an old maintainer, new maintainer thing.
It's going to be some even more incoherent ramblings compared to this one.
Great. Yeah, just going to be 2 people who've worked on the same app with a year apart being like, what's wrecked? It's going to be perfect. I love it. And it's that's our last show of Hacktoberfest as well, so it's going to be a really good way to, I guess, wrap up the month.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a meta ending.
Yeah, very meta. Anyway, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Matt, for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your Hacktoberfest is restful before we see you on Friday.
Don't know. I think, Sunday is going to be when I stress out again.
Right.
When the app switches over, yeah.
Chaos. Well, best of luck. We look forward to hearing about that. I guess we'll hear a little bit more about that process on Friday.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Marcin, for the love on the hoodie. You can't possibly think why you might like this hoodie. Marcin was on the show last night working on this project.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I will backstage you now. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
And folks who are watching, go nowhere. Because now it's time for our schedule preview. Thank you again, Matt. That was awesome. Thank you, everyone in chat, for asking questions. Let me get into our schedule for the rest of the week. So this is our first show today. We have 3 shows today. What do we have coming up for the rest of the day? So next up, in about 2 hours, we have Ramon. That's going to be a super fun show. Ramon is a Ruby developer, but we are going to be playing the old code game, where we look at old code that they have worked on, and we talk about what they would do differently today. Except they're bringing a Raspberry Pi dance mat. So it's a hardware project. It's in JavaScript, I understand it, and it's a dance controller. It's a dance mat controller for the dance mat games. It's on Raspberry Pi, and apparently the hardware still works. So this next show is going to be a little bit wacky, a little bit wild, looking at a cool hardware project. Exactly, DDR with the Pi is what it is. So that's gonna be super cool. That's in about 2 hours. The last show today is all about CI. So if you were looking at what Matt was showing us about, that bot that was putting all those warnings into the pull request and into the via GitHub Actions, we've got a show for you tonight. That's going to be with Angel Rivera from Circle CI, one of the CI providers. And Angel's going to be talking to our founder, John, and they're going to be having a chat about, what is CI? Why is CI useful? How do developers do CI? Looking at some examples, getting in depth with all things continuous integration, continuous deployment. That is our 9 p.m. UTC show. Tomorrow, first show of the day is Gianluca. Thanks, Mac Just Greg. Thanks for being here. And welcome. Call me Dapper, please. You joined a bit late. We're at the end of the show, but don't worry. In 2 hours, we'll be back. And thank you, everyone, for watching. So our first show of Thursday is with Gianluca. Gianluca is at Equinix Metal. So if you enjoyed our show with Rain, same company. But Gianluca works on the SIG, the special interest group for releases over at Kubernetes. So Gianluca works on the process of getting releases of Kubernetes out the door, which, Kubernetes is a very important project used by lots of people. So the release process there, with all those contributors, all that code, is not a small one. So that's going to be an episode of what we call More Than Code, looking at other ways that you can contribute to projects via helping the release process. So that's going to be interesting. Then we've got Nathaniel from Twilio. Nathaniel, we're doing a old JavaScript project, Nathaniel's first JavaScript project that they wrote in university, and that's going to be like that old code review again, what Nathaniel has learnt now after several years of industry, how he would write that code differently today. The last show of Thursday was with Sam Lanning. They're at the UN, and that's again going to be a hardware project. We're looking at Synesthesia, which is a project for controlling lights, LED strip lights, and music for interactive installations at festivals. And that's again going to be hosted by our founder, John. And then Friday, the last day of Hacktoberfest. Last day of Hacktoberfest on the show. Obviously, Saturday is still Hacktoberfest. But the last day of Hacktoberfest on the show, Nicholas Carrigan, famous from places such as the twitch.tv Raise Devs chat, is going to be joining us. We're going to look at some of Nicholas's projects. Eddie, who is an open source advocate, has been helping loads of people out this Hacktoberfest. We're going to be reflecting on Hacktoberfest with Eddie, how it's been for him, how we think it's gone, what he's been up to. And then our final show, as I just told you, is Chris and Matt doing an old maintainer, new maintainer on the Hacktoberfest app. So that is everything we've got coming up. That's a lot of shows. You don't have to keep track of those yourself. The computers will do it for you. All you have to do is follow us here on Twitch, hit the love heart, then hit the bell, and you'll get notifications whenever we go live. You can also follow us at Twitter, where I will tweet an hour before every show and let you know we're going live. Last thing from me before I jump off. If you haven't heard of Raise.dev, you haven't signed up yet, we are a service to help you level up in your developer career. We have expert coaches who have had the experience of industry. They've written production code. They've learned the things that you can only learn from being inside a company that's actually deploying apps that they don't teach you at university and boot camps, all those things. And they want to help you. And we will match you with those coaches, and you'll work with them. You'll pair program with them. You'll work towards your goals. They'll get you the experience you need to get your first dev job, to get a promotion, to get a raise, whatever it is. And we are completely free. You pay not a penny whilst you're in early access, and you can go and sign up now at raise.dev. So, thank you again, Hugh, for saying that we are Developer Coachella. Welcome to raise.dev Coachella. That's everything from me. I'm going to disappear and see you again in 2 hours. I hope you enjoy your time until then. If you join us for the next show, it's going to be a great one. I'm really excited to see Raspberry Pi DDR. If you don't join us, have a wonderful day. Oh, thanks for signing up, Greg. Mac Just Greg. I really need to get better at pronouncing people's Twitch names. Anyway, I hope to see you at the next show. If we don't, see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you at the next one.